Okay, so hi everyone again, and welcome to another Education USA webinar. This time, our topic is NCAA Sports Scholarships for International Student Athletes. My name is Renata Zhukovska. I am Education USA advisor. I work in Lithuania. Um, so Education USA is a US Department of State network. We have over 430 student advising centers around the world. We provide accurate, comprehensive, and current information about study opportunities in the US. And today's session is part of our mission to support students like you in your educational journey. So today's topic is particularly exciting one for students who combine academic goals with passion for sports. We'll be learning about athletic scholarships, NCAA eligibility, recruitment process for international student athletes. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat throughout the presentation. We plan to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentations. As I mentioned, we are recording this session, and everyone who registered we will send the recording to you. Yes, so and today we are honored to be joined by a very special guest, Elizabeth Thompson, Associate Director of International Outreach and Strategic Partnerships at the NCAA Eligibility Center. So Elizabeth works with international students and organizations around the world to help them navigate the NCAA system, and she brings her experience and insider knowledge to share with us today. So Elizabeth, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me here today and welcome to everyone. I will be going through a lot of information in this presentation, but as it was said, you will receive the recording to this. I will also provide our hosts today with the PDF of this slide deck. That way you will be able to click on all of the links for your resources and information after today. This presentation does have some QR codes in it, so if you are not on your smartphone and have a smartphone nearby, you can keep that out to scan for some additional resources that I will be sharing throughout the presentation. If not, again, you can have the PDF afterwards where you'll be able to click on the links to view all of the resources that are in here. So things that we will be going over today is understanding higher education in the US, how the system is structured, an explanation of what is the NCAA, and particularly the NCAA Eligibility Center, which is kind of the front door to college athletics in the United States, what the registration process looks like for students interested in playing a sport in the US with the NCAA, what subjects you need to study. We refer to those as core courses, what grade point average you would need, resources for you to find, what the different outcomes could be for Division 1, 2, and even 3 eligibility. And then I'm going to go over some recruiting information and best practices with you, and then we will wrap up with resources and some question and answer time for you today. So understanding US higher education system. So most times in the US, university is referred to as college or university. Secondary school or high school in the United States typically ends in grade 12, and then students go on to various different forms of college or university in the United States. We use those terms interchangeably here. Some colleges or universities are also called institutes. So for an example of that would be MIT or Massachusetts Institute of Technology. That is a very prestigious university that just happens to be referred to as an institute. We also have other common pathways in order to achieve a college or university degree, which is referred to as a bachelor's degree in the United States. And those are two-year schools, which are called junior colleges or community colleges. So those are two-year schools that offer an associate's degree. Some students choose to start at those schools and then after earning their associate's degree, transfer into a college college or university, a four-year college or university, where they could go on to achieve a bachelor's degree and even potentially move forward into further degrees such as a master's degree or a doctorate degree. But it's important to note that all NCAA schools are four-year colleges or universities that offer those bachelor's degrees. So community colleges and junior colleges are not a part of the NCAA system. And then another example is that we're just one of a few different college sports associations within the United States. So there's the NCAA, which is probably about the largest association. We have three different divisions that our universities are made up of. But then there's also, when I referred to those junior colleges or community colleges, those junior colleges are a part of an organization called the NJCAA, which is the National Junior College Athletic Association. And then there's another association also called the NAIA, which is separate from NCAA, which I'll talk to you about today and focus on. But then also know that if you aren't playing a sport for a scholarship at an NCAA school, there are other opportunities to continue to play your sport at an NCAA school. So aside from the NCAA team, which is kind of the one that represents the university at more of like a varsity level, there are club and intramural sports. So club teams compete against other club teams from other schools. It's on a kind of a smaller scale. It's typically some of the lesser known sports, and I'll talk to you about what sports are NCAA sports in an upcoming slide. And then intramural. Intramural is much less competitive. It might be you just get together for one day, like on a Sunday, to play kickball or softball with other students on campus, and there typically aren't jerseys, and it's not as much of a formal thing. It's more of just a fun thing to do with other students on campus. So there's lots of different opportunities to play sports, but I'm going to focus on kind of the most competitive scholarship tied to varsity level NCAA sports at our universities. And then just also making sure that you understand that international students, all students are required to register with the NCAA Eligibility Center in order to play a sport at an NCAA school. So the Eligibility Center for the NCAA is only associated with the NCAA. So that does not give you a pathway to NAIA or junior colleges. You would need to apply to those schools and through their athletic associations separately from ours. So let's talk a little bit more about what the NCAA is. So over 1,100 colleges and universities make up the NCAA, our association, across three divisions. And so this helps you understand a little bit more about the difference in the three divisions. Division one is typically known as the most competitive division, but there are so many colleges and universities at each division level that I would tell you that even if you're attending a Division One school where there are 355 different Division One schools and programs, if you're, at the top Division Two school competing for a national championship at the Division Two level, that program or school may be more competitive than some of the lower level Division One schools. And then you'll also notice that the largest amount of colleges and universities at the NCAA is actually Division Three. So there are opportunities, as I said, across all three divisions. So a Division One school, what determines if it's Division One based on Division Two or Division Three is the number of students that attend that campus. So Division One schools typically have upwards of anywhere from 20 to 40,000 students that attend that university. So it's a larger university, larger athletic facilities, larger budget, larger fan attendance to their games versus Division Two. It's a little smaller, and Division Three is typically your smallest colleges or universities. But there are lots of opportunities across all of those sports and all of those universities. And then a lot of the questions that we get is, do you offer my sport at the NCAA level? So currently we offer over 24 different championship sports, with women's wrestling most recently being named the most recent full sport for a national championship. So we host 90 different championships across our three divisions in those 24 sports. So, women's wrestling just recently moved from an emerging sport, which just means a smaller number of colleges or universities that offer them. So, it's not yet to a national championship level. But women's wrestling was just named the most recent sport to move to a championship level. So, beginning this fall, it will also have a national championship with us. So, we obviously don't offer every sport out there. We get lots of questions about men's rugby, for example, or men's rowing, all of which are not NCAA sports, but they can be a club or an intramural sport. Most oftentimes, a club sport. Cricket's another one we get a lot of questions about, not an NCAA sport, just because there aren't enough NCAA schools that offer that sport on their campus to be a nationally recognized sport with enough kind of competition across the schools. So lots of opportunities at the club level. So if you have an interest in a sport that you don't see here, I would say reach out through those associations. Like maybe there's a National Cricket Association for colleges and universities in the US that you could look into what schools would offer that sport and if there's a scholarship there. It just means it's not governed by us at the NCAA. We have a really great interactive map. Again, these hyperlinks will be available for you to click on that shows you every college and university in the United States, where they are located, and then what sports they offer, what degrees they offer, and what opportunities would be there for you. So when you get an opportunity, really work with this interactive map to help you decide. So maybe you are interested in studying business and you want to swim and you know you want to go to a Division II school. You can sort by those filters in order to find different programs that might interest you to apply to those universities or send interest in receiving a sports scholarship to their program. Lots of things that you should take into consideration when choosing an NCAA school. What is the size of that school? The location? Are you looking for a school that's in a larger metropolitan setting, or are you looking for a school that's kind of out in more of a rural setting with not as much city life around it? What degree are you looking to achieve? So, what do you want to major in school? So, you typically choose a major that you want to focus on to earn your degree in. And so you would want to see if that school offers that and what type of programs they have. Asking about the full cost of attendance. So, not every scholarship is a full scholarship. So, it's important for you to know what is the full cost of attendance? What is my scholarship going to cover? If there is a difference that you would have to be responsible for in order to attend that university. Checking on their admissions requirements, what type of affiliation. So some schools have religious affiliations here in the United States. So you would want to check and ask about those types of things to just make sure it's a proper fit for you and that you don't have any surprises once arriving to campus. The student to faculty ratio. So how many, what's a typical class size? So I attended a smaller Division II school. Our classes could range anywhere from 12 to 30 students in the classroom. But if you're attending a large Division I program, some of your lecture halls for class may have upwards of 200 to 400 students in the classroom. So those are important questions to ask as to what is the best learning environment for you. But then also knowing and asking the question about what type of playing time would you get? Would you get more playing time if you attended a Division II or III school versus a Division I school? And is that an important factor for you and your overall experience at the university? But you can find more information on our website at on.ncaa.com/choosing. So next I'm going to talk to you about the NCAA Eligibility Center, or kind of like the front porch or the front door of the NCAA. So it's where all student athletes come through. It's where they start in their process and in their experience with college athletics at an NCAA school. Our job is to certify all student athletes as eligible to compete at an NCAA school. So the reason for that is that all of the universities want to ensure fairness and equity in competition. So if one student at one school is playing against another school, that those students had to go through the same minimum requirements to be certified to be a student athlete within the organization of NCAA sports. So we review your high school academics, and I'll talk more about that in upcoming slides, but year nine in your country through your secondary school graduation is what we would be looking at to make sure that you're meeting the academic requirements, and then also ensuring that you're an amateur in your sport. So not paid any large amounts professionally in order to play your sport. So those are the things that we look at in order to, again, create a fair and equitable competition across all divisions and all NCAA schools. So there are three things that you want to be sure that you're tracking on when it comes to NCAA eligibility and when it comes to preparing for attending a U.S. university. So the first is, what are the graduation requirements in your home country at your high school in order to graduate? That is first and most important, is to make sure that you are graduating and earning your secondary degree or certificate or diploma. The next is tracking on the initial eligibility process for the NCAA, which is what I'll be covering today. So, what are those courses that have to be taken to be eligible to compete at any NCAA school? And then the third piece, which is also separate from the first two, is the college admissions process. So, and I'll talk more about that on the next slide. It's important to know that just because you are deemed eligible by the NCAA to play a sport and to compete on a team at an NCAA school does not necessarily mean that you're admitted into each of those schools. The admissions process is separate from athletics eligibility. So, what that means is that you register with the NCAA, go through our process, and are deemed certified as eligible to compete for the school, but you still have to choose the school that you want to attend, be offered a scholarship by that school, and I'll talk about that process in a minute, and be admitted to that college or university. So if you wanted to attend Elizabeth University in the fall, you would register with the NCAA, submit your transcripts, submit your translations, all the documents that you need, and be certified by the NCAA as eligible to compete for any school. But if you wanted to compete for Elizabeth University, you would have to apply to that university and be admitted based on that university's admission standards. And there are things that can vary from the admissions requirement to NCAA athletic eligibility. So one of those things is maybe a requirement of an SAT or an ACT or an English language test, such as a TOEFL, IELTS, Duolingo. There are lots of different ones out there that are required in the admissions process. Those are not required for NCAA athletic eligibility, but most likely going to be required for you to be admitted to the university that you ultimately choose to attend. So I would just recommend, again, looking at our website on.ncaa.com/choosing college so that you can find the right fit for you and then what the requirements are to be admitted to that school. As I mentioned earlier, there are lots of different scholarships at the Division I and Division II level. So what those scholarships or financial aid could cover could be tuition and fees. So the cost of attendance there, room and board. So you cost to live on campus, food, etc., books, course related books and supplies if there were additional ones. And then there are different types of scholarships referred to as multi-year scholarship options, which is available at the Division I level, but not the Division II level. And what that means is that if you are being recruited to, swim for a Division I university, they could offer you a multi-year scholarship, meaning up to 4 or 5 years with 4 years of eligibility. But Division II schools aren't able to offer that. Theirs are what's called 1 year scholarship options that are renewable. So you would get the scholarship for 1 year. At the end of that year, you would meet with the coach and you would discuss if your scholarship was being renewed for the next academic year. So there are lots of different types of opportunities for scholarships at those schools. It's important to note Division III colleges and universities do not offer athletic scholarships. So what that means is everything is merit-based, academic-based. So it is not tied to your athletic competition in order to receive a scholarship at the Division III level. And then I just mentioned earlier, there are lots of different types of scholarships, academic scholarships, athletic scholarships, full scholarships, partial scholarships, the renewal process. So it's important to do as well as you can at the secondary school level academically, because a lot of times coaches will combine an athletic scholarship with an academic scholarship that their financial aid office can offer you. In Sometimes being a strong academic student actually makes you more recruitable compared to another student in your position or your sport, because of the fact that the coach may not have to use as much scholarship money when offering you that scholarship so that they can recruit more students. So it's also important to know you don't apply for a sports scholarship. Sports scholarships are offered to you by the coach of that team at that university. You can email them and show interest in it, but the coach ultimately would be offering to you based on your athletics ability and if you're able to be admitted to the school. But there's not an application process through the NCAA or through the university to be recruited. So you have to go through the registration process with the NCAA to be certified as eligible to compete for the school and receive that scholarship. But the coaches are the ones that are offering those scholarships in the recruiting process for their university. A little bit of information here about going pro. Less than 2% of NCAA student athletes actually go on to be professional athletes in those sports. So that's why it's so important to aim for that college degree that will set you up for the rest of life and through those experiences in order to go on and become a professional at something else other than sports once that ball stops dribbling or once those sporting abilities end for you. This is a great image that I always suggest individuals take a photo of that just talks about the process from registration through arriving to campus so you know what to expect along the way. Again, we're going to send the PDF of this where all of the resources you see in blue that are hyperlinked will be available for you to click on. As I mentioned earlier, the first step in this process is to register with the NCAA. We recommend students do it as young as year 9, but we understand that many international students are not learning about this process until later on in secondary school or even sometimes after secondary school. So the first step in the process is to register with the NCAA. This is what our website looks like. The background changes sometimes week to week with new sports being shown on there, but our website is eligibilitycenter.org. And this is where you would click on the orange circle in the middle of the page that says register in order to start your registration process. So there are 3 different account types that we have on our website. The first is our free profile page account. So maybe you have a little bit of interest in this, but you're not quite sure yet if this is the path for you going to a college or university in the US. That's why we recommend our free profile page. There's no cost associated with it. It gets you registered, it gets you receiving information as far as what you would need to send to us, what the requirements are, our newsletters, so that you stay up to date and can prepare if you end up being recruited and have interest in attending an NCAA school. So I tell everyone start with that free profile page because there's no cost associated with it. And there's the information there for it as well. So if you have any questions, you can click on any of these. But again, it's a free profile page with no cost associated with it. The second account type is our academic and amateurism certification account. You may see the name of this account change a little bit in the future, but this is the full certification account with the NCAA. If you are actively being recruited by a Division 1 or 2 school, if you would like to keep options of all divisions open, Division 1, 2, or 3, this is the account type that you would need. Currently, there is a $160 US fee for international students. It's a one-time registration. Once you have that account, you have it for life. It doesn't go away. It doesn't have to be renewed. So it is a one-time fee. I will tell everyone that fee is likely going to be going up on September 1st as we reassess every few years with the cost of that. So I would encourage you, if this is something you're thinking about, to do the registration before that fee goes up. We also do have fee waiver criteria. So if you are from a need-based background, from a financial standpoint, you can click on the link for the fee waiver criteria. And then if you meet that criteria, you would just have your school sign off on that. Even an Education USA office representative could help with that as well. But there is a fee waiver form that you could have submitted on your behalf if financially you are unable to cover the cost of that fee. And then our amateurism only certification account. Again, this one, the title of this may change as well, but there will still be three account types. That is for Division III student athletes only. So if you already know you want to go to a Division III school, you're being recruited by a Division III coach, you have no interest in Division I or Division II, then that's where this account type would be right for you. There is a lesser fee associated with that. That's a one-time $70 US dollar fee with that account. There's also fee waiver criteria for that if you would qualify, and the information is there. But this account is for Division III only because we certify the amateurism for all Division III international student athletes. So next, I'm going to talk about core courses. Again, I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, if you have your smartphone out, I'll give you a moment here to scan this QR code. This is going to take you to a resource that talks about what are core courses and all the different variations of what is not a core course and what is acceptable as a core course. And what I mean by that are the subjects that you are studying in secondary school and which of those subjects would count towards the academic requirements that I'll be covering in just a moment. Okay, so when you click on that QR code, it's going to take you to a resource with lots of different subjects. That is the resource that we use when reviewing your transcripts from year 9 in your country through secondary school graduation to determine which subjects fall into these boxes that you see here. So for NCAA core course purposes, the universities determined that these are the subjects they want us to focus on when determining your athletics eligibility based on how higher education is structured in the US. So there is a core component at universities in the United States that focus on a base level education in these areas. So when you go to a university, you're in the States, you're going to have core subjects that you study, and then you're going to have courses that you major in towards your degree. So if you're a biology major, you'll likely be taking a lot more courses towards that subject, but everyone at that university is going to have to take the same level of English and mathematics and sciences as those core subjects towards that university degree. So that's why these areas are important. I think someone was asking for the QR code again. We will provide all of these resources afterwards, as well as the links for you. So if you missed any of the QR codes, they're provided to you. So the subjects that we would be looking at in your transcript towards the requirements, which I'll talk about in a minute, are English. We also would be considering the native language in your country, and I'll tell you where you can find that resource to know which languages count as native, depending on where you're attending secondary school. Mathematics at the Algebra 1 level or higher, so Math 9 and up. Sciences. So when we say sciences, we mean natural or physical sciences, things such as biology, chemistry, physics. Those are areas, earth science, that we consider natural or physical science. Social sciences, those are things like history, geography, government, law, civics, world history. So those are the subject areas. Social sciences, sociologies, economics, all of those count as social sciences. And then world languages. So if you are taking a foreign language in addition to your English and your native language, those can also count. They're not a requirement, but they can count. So these are just the areas that can count. We'll talk about what the requirements are in a minute. Comparative religion. So things such as world religion course. So same thing with a philosophy. If it's a philosophy course that's not specific in one doctrine, such as philosophy would count, ethics would not, because that's one specific area of philosophy. But you can find all of the information on our course title usage guide for what would or would not count from your transcript. We also have a Division 1 and 2 worksheet. So as I cover the academic requirements, if you wanted to do a self-assessment to see where you were on track towards meeting eligibility, you could use these worksheets to input your course, the credit amount, which I'll tell you in the resources section where to find that, and the grade that you would earn. And I have information in this presentation that will cover the conversions as well. But this is just an example of what that would look like as to how to calculate a core course GPA so that you understand how we're doing that for NCAA purposes. So an example would be if you took English 10 for 1 credit and you got an A, which is worth 4 quality points, which I'll talk about that in upcoming slides. That would mean so if you got the highest grade possible in your country or your school for an A, that would mean that course would be a 4.0. And we'll talk about those conversions later, but that would be your grade point average, your core course grade point average. Again, we would look at all of the required subjects, but that's how you would input courses to determine a GPA. So next, I'm going to start talking about country-specific resources. So where you can find the information for your country. So if you scan this QR code, this will take you to our country-specific web pages where you'll then select based on your part of the world that you're in. So if you're joining us today from Europe, you'll scan this QR code, you'll click on Europe, then you'll have a whole list of countries with PDFs available. If you happen to be attending from an international baccalaureate school, if you click on Europe and scroll down to the I's, that's where you'll find the resource for international baccalaureate that would help give you all of that information. So scanning that QR code takes you to this website, and then there at the bottom is where you see the different parts of the world broken up, and then you click on the one based on where you are, and then click on the country that you are attending school in or the program that you're attending school in, and you will find resources that look like this. So the first example I'm going to use in today's presentation is Estonia. So every country has a background information section at the top. It's going to tell you what is year 9 called in that country for NCAA purposes, because remember, we're looking at your coursework from year 9 through secondary school graduation. So it's important to know what do we consider year 9 for NCAA purposes, because that's going to vary everywhere in the world. Some people try to convert to the US system. So this is your kind of one-stop resource to know what we will be looking at for your eligibility. After that, you'll see the timeline for graduation. I mentioned earlier native languages. So you will see there's a native language section in the background information that would list all languages that we would consider to be a native language from your country. We also have acceptable forms of proof of high school graduation. So what you need to earn in order to meet graduation requirements for NCAA purposes, followed by grading scales, followed by crediting, and then additional courses and information that you would need in order to assess your eligibility. So next I'm going to talk about excuse me, grade point averages. So the first thing that's important to understand is that the US operates on a 4.0 grading scale. And I will help you in just a moment show you how your grades convert to those alpha grades that will then give you those quality points. So that 4.0 scale means an A being the highest grade is a 4.0, B 3.0, C 2.0, D 1.0. Failures or Fs are worth no quality points toward your grading scale conversion. So what you would do, and I'll talk in an upcoming slide about what GPA that you need in order to be eligible, depending on the division that you end up attending. So for example, Division 1 requires a minimum in the average of your core courses that are required of a 2.3. So if you're joining us from Latvia, you would see that on the Latvia's 10-point scale, grades of an 8 and a 7 are considered a B, and a 6 and a 5 are considered to be a C, which is a 2.0. So if you need a 2.3 or higher on that 4.0 scale, that would mean students from Latvia would need to try to get more 7s and 8s or higher than they would 6s or 5s. Because if you only had 6s or 5s, that would mean you would have a 2.0 GPA, which would mean you would not have that 2.3 that is required. And we don't round, so it's very important that you try to get higher than that 2.3 to be eligible. You can see the same for what we call word descriptor grading scales. So you see the words listed on the left there, what the translation is, and then what the US grade equivalent is in order to get you to those quality point conversions. Here's an example for Lithuania. So if you're a student joining us from Lithuania, you would want to try to aim for sevens or eights or higher to make sure that you're staying above the 2.0. I'll talk in a moment about how we're going to look at your 16 core courses for eligibility. So when averaging those, you may have some C's or fours and sixes, as well as some sevens and eights or nines and tens. Overall, you would want to make sure that your grade point average stays above the 2.3 when converting. So next we're going to talk about certification outcomes for the purposes of time today to make sure I get to the recruiting section. There's some of these that I won't spend a lot of time on, but I want to make sure that they're in this slide deck for you to understand what we're looking at. So there's early academic qualifier, which just means if you have a very high GPA in your first 3 years of core courses, that you could be fully eligible. But for today's purpose, we're going to focus on a qualifier. So when we look at your transcripts from year 9 through secondary school graduation, we are looking for 16 core course credits. And when we average the grades of those 16 core course credits, average of those, again, looking over multiple years of schooling, year 9 through secondary school graduation, the average of those subjects must be a 2.3 or higher on that 4.0 scale. So we'll talk about that breakdown in just a minute. But in order to be Division One eligible or a qualifier, by definition, that means that you're eligible to receive your scholarship, which we call athletics aid. You'd be immediately eligible to practice and compete at an NCAA school. So in order to be a full qualifier for Division One, you have to earn those 16 core course credits, which I'll show you the breakdown of in just a moment. And they must be done within your timeline for graduation. So year 9 through what is the expected timeline for graduation, which your country's resource. And then you must graduate secondary school and earn a minimum of a 2.3 core course GPA. So this is the breakdown of those 16 core course credits. So if you have your phone out, you can snap a picture of this, but also remember that we will be sending you this resource afterwards. So essentially, we would go through your transcripts year by year, looking at all subjects that you studied in an effort to get you these 16 credits that are required in order to be Division One eligible. So 4 credits of an English and or native language. So if you took English and your native language in year 9, that's going to give you 1 credit towards English, 1 credit towards native language. So right there, you would have 2 out of the 4 credits from year 9 in that first bucket that you see. Same thing with math. If you studied mathematics in year 9, that's going to count as 1 of the 3 credits that you need. So essentially, if you studied mathematics and it was approved for each year of secondary school, you should have enough to meet that requirement as well. So Division One also has what's referred to as an academic red shirt. So if you got 16 core courses, graduated secondary school, but you did not get the 2.3 GPA, maybe only 2.0, that would mean that you could be an academic red shirt, which means you can practice in the first term and you can receive your scholarship in the first year. You just cannot compete that first year. So all students have 5 years of a 5 year clock to use 4 seasons of eligibility. So essentially, that would be the first year of your 5 year clock if you came into NCAA with full eligibility when certified. And then you could use the 4 seasons after that first redshirt year, is how that works. And that's very common for incoming freshmen or first year students to do that. And then a non-qualifier is defined as someone that did not meet those academic requirements that we mentioned earlier. So you would not be eligible to receive a scholarship, practice, or compete. Essentially, you could have no affiliation with the university's sports program or athletic department in that first year. Division two, I'm not going to focus on early academic qualifier today just because of the amount of time left, but just know that there is that outcome as well. But a Division two qualifier, very similar to Division one. So still need those 16 core courses, still need to graduate secondary school. The GPA requirement is just slightly different. So Division one required a 2.3, Division two requires a 2.2 GPA. And this is the subject area breakdown. I always tell students aim for Division one eligibility. By default, you will also be Division two eligible. So if you aim for those Division one 16 core courses and 2.3 GPA, by default, you would also be Division two eligible. And then partial qualifier. So maybe something happened where you weren't able to get that grade point average or you weren't able to get those 16 core courses. Division two has a really great opportunity that differs slightly from Division one, which says that you could still be a partial qualifier. So maybe the scholarship option is no longer there for you at the Division one level because maybe you specialized in a very unique, technical or vocational program in high school that resulted in you not being academically eligible for not having enough core courses. You may still have an opportunity to get a scholarship at a Division two level as long as you're admitted to that Division two university. So as long as you are admitted to the university and submit your proof of graduation and are certified, you could at minimum receive scholarship and practice with a team at a Division two school. So everything that I covered today is also included on this initial eligibility flyer. So if you scan this QR code here, it will give you a one-page PDF flyer that also has hyperlinked resources in it, but has those breakdowns of those 16 core courses and the grade point average, as well as linking to our international guide. So Division three, I mentioned earlier, and you noticed that I did not cover academic requirements for Division three. That is because Division three does not require the academics. They don't offer scholarships at the Division three level, so it's the everything is academic or merit-based scholarships, which simply just means that you register with the NCAA and you're certified as an amateur in your sport, which may still require us to review your academic transcripts to establish your graduation timeline, but you would work with the Division three school recruiting you to see what financial aid opportunities are there through participating in a sport. So you can definitely still participate in a sport or multiple sports, even Division three, because there are lesser time demands. A lot of students end up playing multiple sports for a Division three college or university, but just know that the academic piece is determined by the university and not certified by the NCAA. And then if we have any students with education impacting disabilities, just know that there are accommodations available towards these academic requirements. You can learn more about that on our website at on.ncaa.com/EID, where you can find the application process to submitting your documentation to receive those accommodations. One thing that's important to note about reclassifying, if you're a student athlete that might end up reclassifying to graduate or taking time off after high school, but before coming to a university, that can, and continuing to compete in your sport, that can impact the amount of eligibility that you have available at an NCAA school. So I would just suggest finding more information on our website. Again, it will be in the presentation about the impact that delaying enrollment to a university and continuing to compete in your sport can have on you in the recruiting process and in your eligibility. So next, I'm going to touch briefly on the recruiting process. So these are all activities that we define as recruiting. So if you receive any of the following type of communication from an NCAA coach or their university, that is considered active recruiting. So phone calls, messages on WhatsApp, emails, direct messages on social media, them coming to visit and observe you compete in your country or offering to pay for you to come visit their university, offering you a written financial aid agreement. All of those things are considered active recruiting. Most of the time, those do not start occurring until grade 11, but they can send you interest materials as young as grade 9 or year 9. In order to be certified by an NCAA school, you do have to be on that school's institutional request list. It's called an IRL. One of a really great resource for you to find is recruiting calendars. So on our website, and I'll provide that in just a moment, we have all of the recruiting calendars per sport that talk about when coaches are allowed to reach out. So they have to operate under their sport and their division's rules, which means a Division I tennis coach is going to have a recruiting calendar that might be different from a Division II basketball coach, and a Division II women's basketball coach might have a different recruiting calendar than a Division II men's basketball coach. So it's all broken down as to when they're allowed to contact you, when they're allowed to evaluate you. One is, and all of what the different terms mean can also be found in our resources. So, for example, a dead period is, or a recruiting shutdown means that coaches are not allowed to be doing any recruiting during that time. So if you're wondering why you aren't hearing from a coach, it might be that you're too young in the recruiting process, or it's a time of year that they're not allowed to be recruiting. So just keep that in mind and do the research for your sport when determining if coaches are able to respond or maybe why they haven't responded. You can scan the QR code here in order to access those recruiting calendars, again, by division, by sport for each division. And then visits to universities, NCAA schools are referred to as official or unofficial visits. So, official visits are ones in which that university is offering to pay for you and potentially up to two family members to come visit their university to determine if that university is the right fit with you or for you. And in order to do an official visit, you must first be registered with the Eligibility Center, be on that school's recruiting list, which they take care of by getting your NCAA ID number. Every student is given a 10-digit ID number when they register with the NCAA. And so that is what they would use to activate you in our system for their school's request list. And then they would need a copy of your transcript to be on file with us as well. And then unofficial visits are ones that the university is not paying, but they're saying you're welcome to come visit here anytime. So if your family has the means to go visit colleges or universities, those would be unofficial visits. And then these are just a resource that tells you what, based on the division, what they're able to offer to you in an official visit. And those vary from school to school, or not school to school, I apologize. Those vary from division to division. So if you're thinking, wow, this Division II school didn't offer me as much as Division I, it might be because of the fact that the rules are different for the different divisions. Important questions that we suggest that you ask in the recruiting process to make sure that there is a realistic expectation when you go to attend that school and play for that team are listed here on this page. It's really important to ask these questions to the coaching staff, to the athletic department, to make sure that you're well prepared for expectation. One of the biggest things that we see or hear is that students don't ask about playing time, and they automatically assume because they were a top athlete in their country or on their team before coming to the NCAA school that they would be a starter or a top player on that university's team. And that's not always the case. So if you don't ask the coach, where do you see me in your depth chart? Do you see me being a starter or a backup? Do you see me having a lot of playing time? That coach could have in their mind that you're going to, for example, redshirt freshman year, which means you're not going to play at all. You're going to practice with the team, you'll get a scholarship, but they want you to acclimate to campus. They want you to train. They want you to get bigger, stronger, and then play in the future years. If you never had that conversation in the recruiting process, that might be a hard adjustment for you when going to that school where you're not playing the first year, but you thought you were going to be. So that's why it's really important to ask those questions in the recruiting process. And then here are a list of best practices for the purposes of time. I won't go through all of these, but just make sure that you're reading through here and doing your research to choose the school that's the right fit for you and reaching out to colleges or universities in the recruiting process. So one way that you can reach out to schools is, say you're a water polo player and you're interested in playing water polo. You can research and find the list on our website of all Division I water polo programs. From there, you can go to each of those universities' website, click on their athletic department, go to their staff directory, and then look for the water polo coaches. I always tell students start by emailing an assistant coach or a position coach because head coaches are very busy at our programs and typically are not responding to emails. So it would be important to start with an assistant coach or a position coach, but that's where you could send them an email with your sports resume, a little bit about you and your interest in their program. I definitely encourage you tailor each of those emails to the school or university that you're interested in. If you send out one email to 50 different coaches and they can tell it's a generic email, they're less likely to respond to you. So if I send an email to Elizabeth University and I said, "Hey, Coach Thompson, I really like your program. It's a really great Division II program. I saw how you won your conference last year. I'm interested in business management, which I see is a strong program at your university. Here are my times in my sport. This is the position that I play. I would really love to have more conversation about you, about playing for your university this upcoming fall." And then attach my sports resume that would have the teams I played on, times if it's an individual sport, rankings. All of that information, that is the best way to reach out to coaches to show your interest in receiving a sports scholarship and coming to play for them. And so then if they're interested and it's a time period in which they're allowed to respond based on that recruiting calendar, they would probably send you back maybe a questionnaire that they have you fill out for their school. They might send you a link to their university's application process to apply to be admitted to the university. They may ask you for some follow-up transcripts, what year you're graduating, those types of things. So just keep in mind that's a best practice for how to reach out. There's a lot of information out there around name, image, and likeness. I would just tell you, as an international student athlete, I would encourage you to ask those questions in the recruiting process. They had international students in the past on their program who have been able to take part in name, image, and likeness. So NCAA rules say to monetize their name, image, and likeness with their university. The challenges that international students face versus a US student are visa regulations. So, F1 visas, which is most likely what most international students would come over here on, limit you in active income for during and while being on an F1 visa. So, the universities are going to have to potentially work with their designated school official on campus that maintains their SEVIS or visa compliance to make sure what anything that you monetize would be acceptable for immigration purposes. They may look into some passive income options for you. So just keep in mind that it's a bit more challenging in the name, image, and likeness space for international student athletes. And that's why it's very important for you those questions in the recruiting process as to what experience those universities have with it and how they can best support you. And then again, athletics aid that's offered at a Division I or II school, you don't have to sign with a school, you can. And if you do, that ends the recruiting process for other schools and no longer being able to contact you once you've signed with a school that commits you to that school for one academic year. And then you must be eligible through the NCAA Eligibility Center in order to receive that scholarship. There's information on here if there's any students looking to transfer in or transfer from their university for the purposes of time today. I won't spend a lot on that, but just know we have transfer guides for 4-year transfers. So if you're transferring from an international university to an NCAA school, our 4-year transfer guide is there for you. And then I'll wrap it up with some resources that we have here. Again, you'll get this recording, you'll get the PDF that has all of the hyperlinks here that have everything that we went through. And you can also, if you have questions after the question and answer portion today, you can connect with the Eligibility Center via that QR code that takes you to the contact form. We do ask that at minimum you have that profile page set up so you can include your NCAA ID number in that inquiry to our staff so they can help best navigate you through the process. And then I also encourage you our guide to international academic standards. The QR code is there for you as well. That will help you find information on over 185 different countries. It's growing all the time, but that's where you can find information for each country. And then last but not least, please be sure to follow us on social media. We're all on our phones a lot on social media, and this is the way to get regular updates right there to your phone with any changes in academic requirements. We are going through a very transitional time here at the NCAA. If, for those that don't know, outside of the United States, we have a very large pending House settlement, which just may shift the landscape of college athletics a little bit. So if you see changes to account names or if you see changes to any of the process, those are going to be updated real time on our social media. And then you would see updates in our presentations and in our resources following that. So that's why it's really important to follow us on any or all of the platforms that you see here so that you get that information.